Your technique is not where all the power is. Your technique just determines who's going to come and see you. But your gratitude for service, your love for what you're doing, when you're inspired by the vision you have as a healer, you're enthusiastically working, you're certain about your skills, and you're present with the patient, really present with the patient. That's what makes your practice grow. Whatever we see in others is a reflection of what we see in ourselves. We only resent people that remind us of parts of ourselves we're ashamed of, that we're avoiding them because they're reminding of us, because we're, with our amygdala, addicted to avoid our shame and seek our pride. We want to feel our pride. But at the same time, when we're proud, we're looking at somebody that's reminding us of a part of ourselves we're admiring in ourselves that we're too proud or too humble to admit we have. So as long as we're judging somebody, we're disowning parts in ourselves, and that disowned part is an empty void which loses our power in healing consciousness. Healing consciousness is a state of consciousness when you have pure reflective awareness, when you're present with somebody. One with a bone, as Sisyphus used to say. And when you're there, the adjustment takes care of itself. You don't even have to make it a thrust. How many of you have been so present that the adjustment just did it while your hands were about setting up? And they just, when you're present, there's no effort that's involved. It's the most effective and efficient state. And the mass of that, that's why the practice gives you feedback. All the symptoms in your practice is a feedback to let you know when you're not being authentic. And the second you're in the flow and authentic and you're in the zone, if you will, you're in tune, on time, and on target with being, on your mission. How many of you notice the telephones ring, the people come in, people who weren't even scheduled show up? I mean, things start to magically happen. So the universe rewards you by being authentic, by being inspired, by being grateful, by being loving. That's a universal principle that we can't defy. But the adjustment is not only a physical adjustment, which is taking a luxation or a dislocation or a micro dislocation and putting it back in proper position, but it's a state of mind. Now, subluxation, lux means light in physics. I was in Egypt just a couple weeks ago and went to Luxor. Lux meant light, the city of light. And if you study lux, it means lumens per steradian, or lumens per square meter. That's its definition, which means the illumination, the intensity of photons per square meter, or per square steradian if you deal with radians in a collimated circle. The intensity of that light. So that's the intelligence. We could use that as an enlightened intelligence. To the degree that we have enlightened intelligence, we bring order. But subluxation, ation means a condition of, sublux means less than the full expression of light and intelligence expressed to the body. Therefore, educated intelligence, which causes you to judge, which causes you not to be enlightened and fully awakened in the bodhisattvic state, then you automatically are subluxating the healing power. So the moment you're in a judging state, how many of you know when you had stinking thinking, ingratitude, attitude, pity party, hold drum, doldrum, your stars are scars, you're in emotional state, you have digital craniorectilitis syndrome, where your thumb is in your mouth, your head is up your ass, right? When you're in that state, how many of you noticed that the practice isn't flowing? But how many of you know when all of a sudden you get centered again and get back into the zone again, and then all of a sudden things start to work and it goes fluently? Your patients give you feedback to try to get you back into the zone. How many of you learned that when certain people come in, you know you must be having a stinking thinking day because they don't show up except on those days? And other people, when they come in, you know you're on highs. You're resonating very high energy. So you are attracted in your clients where you're playing in the field. And so adjustment, now here's the thing that I learned, and your technique is not where all the power is.
Yeah.
Your technique just determines who's going to come and see you. Your technique just determines who's going to see you. But your gratitude for service, your love for what you're doing, when you're inspired by the vision you have as a healer, you're enthusiastically working, you're certain about your skills, and you're present with the patient, really present with the patient, that's what makes your practice grow. Your technique is just going to determine who's going to come see you. But your volume is not based on your technique. People think it's about the technique, but the technique is a vehicle that filters out people in the environment to get the people that resonate with that technique. So the adjustment is as much a mental state as it is a physical state. It's both. And you want to honor both. It's a somatic psychic, psychic somatic, it's a combination of that. Because you could take a machine and go and tap vertebra in various spots, and you will get an impact, without a doubt. But you put a human who's present with that doing that same action, and you will have a way more powerful impact. Way more powerful impact. Now, can an adjustment, maneuvering a bone, change the compression and tension on the bone and the compression and tension on the musculature of the bone and cause piezoelectrical influence and change the electronics of nerve conduction and change the vasculature dilation or constriction of vasculature and cause kinesiopathology and physiopathology? Absolutely. And can you actually going in there and adjusting a subluxation physically impact that and even impact nerve conduction, nerve impulses, and epigenetic changes in transcription of DNA and down to the subtle level? Absolutely. But you put the psychology and that together and you now have a powerful transformation in human beings' lives. Because you put those two together, they work as a team. I don't think we need to separate those two. I think we need to realize that they're congruent. When you're actually present, they become congruent. And your efficiency of your delivery of your adjustment is most profound if you're present. I did experiments with adjusting many years ago in the 80s. And I found out that the doctors that drew and magnetized patients developed a style. So if you've never videotaped yourself and developed a unique style, I can encourage you to consider that. It will grow your practice if you do. And I watched chiropractors that had higher volume, and I noticed a pattern in the way they delivered the adjustment. It wasn't sloppy. It was crisp. It was concise. It was present. And they had a style, and you were magnetized to them. So what I did is I went into this doctor's office somewhere in the United States, and he had an open clinic. This is the beginning of the late 80s when the open clinics were starting to happen. And so the people were watching him. If they were reading something or not paying attention, he wasn't engaged in his adjusting. But if he's engaged in his adjusting, everybody is staring and watching. Mm-hmm. They cannot not watch him adjust. They're drawn to him. So I walk in and I'm looking at him adjusting, and I'm watching, nobody's watching him. So I said, at lunch, we're going to talk about how you adjust. And I had one of his assistants come in and said, can you see they're not watching him? There's no magnetism to him. They don't want to see them. There's nothing wow about his adjustments. We're going to put some wow factor in there. There's a sizzle in this thing. So the way we positioned himself, the way we set him up, the way we made the adjustment, we did the same thing he was doing, but now with a presence. And made him go in and imagine the bone, and then looking at the trabecular pattern of the bone, and then looking at the collagen molecules and down into the atoms and getting really present with it, and then doing a very quick adjustment, very efficient adjustment. In the afternoon, I had the assistant come out and I said, now watch what they're doing. Notice how they're not looking at their newspaper. They're not reading a magazine. They're not wondering what's going on and closing their eyes or whatever. all of them are glued to him now because he's now got a style. The referrals will be proportionate to your magnetism, the way you present that adjustment. If this was the most important moment of your life and you're about to adjust the most important individual in your life, and it was a life and death threatening situation and you were really, really present with it, and you knew you were going to have a massive impact by giving this adjustment, there's a magnetism when you make that adjustment that people want to watch. And when they want to watch you, they want to refer to you. So develop a style. Sit down and watch each other and develop a style. There was a guy that was at Parker Seminar, this Afro-American guy that had this huge practice. And I used to watch him out in the hallways because he'd adjust people in the hallways. And he was unbelievable to watch. And he'd gather 60, 80, 100 people watching him. Anytime he'd be out there adjusting, they'd all come and gather around him. And I was watching, why isn't there they're gathering in? The other guy's going at just 2 tables over, nobody's watching him. This guy's got 100 people watching. Why has this guy got nobody watching him? This guy's kind of just going through a routine, sloppily going through routine and not being precise. Adjustment specific, I think B.J. Palmer called it. That's why B.J. was making sure that they really did the toggle really exactly a certain way, because he knew that was a magnetism pulling people to it. So contemplate your style and videotape it and look at it, and then gather people around, and if they're not watching it, if they're not glued to it, somehow you're not present. Because the moment you're present, there's a magnetic field that draws them to you. Really get present in the style and develop a style that's unique to you that nobody else has. It will make a difference.
You guys learning something? Yes. Everyone take a deep breath in. Breathe out. We're going to take a break shortly, but what I want to do is just at your tables, I'd like you to just draw what's your takeaways. What are some of your takeaways? I've seen some of the notes you guys are taking. There's quite a lot, but they say if everything's important, nothing's important. So what I want you to do is just take, what is your biggest impact, most impactful thing that Dr. John spoke about now? What is one concept that really resonated with you? And just at your table, just share in your own time. I just want to take 30 seconds to 2 minutes. At your table, just quickly share what you've learned in our first session, and we're going to break in a moment. But before we do that, can we please give, Dr. John's back after the break, but you having a good time? Yes. Give him a round of applause, please. Thank you. All right. Just at your tables, quickly share what are your biggest takeaways. Go for it. Person with the longest hair, you can go first this time. Go for it. All right. A couple things that we spoke about last night was Dr. John spoke about 10 very important questions he got asked when he was 27 in practice from finances. You also spoke a little bit about the 15-minute, was it investment strategy you taught your daughter?
Yep.
And that's come up 3 or 4 times in questions. So we could probably head off a little bit that tells that story and take from there.
Okay. I'd first like to, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. It doesn't sound loud, but it must be louder.
Louder.
Okay. So I opened up my practice legally October 12th, 1982. I was 27 years old. I already had a very busy practice in my apartment. I wasn't supposed to be practicing until I got my license, but I had not failed a test all the way through school, so I knew I was going to pass the test. So I figured I better get started. And I targeted the pool at my apartment complex as the primary, and other pools at other apartment complex as a source of patients. Raise your hand if you would agree that that's a good source of patients, the pool. Maybe not in London. Maybe you don't have a pool here. I don't know. But I'm teasing. So I'm about 2.5 weeks into practice. It's about 2 weeks into practice, right at the end of October. And I had made money the first month. So I was already in the positive cash flow the first month. But I was doing a lot of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's in the practice, and I was doing a lot of it. I had one assistant. So she was mainly doing administrative things, and I was doing pretty well everything else. And there was a part of me that felt like, this isn't efficient. I want to be adjusting, and I want to be sharing the message and the mission, and I don't want to be doing supply ordering, bookkeeping, accounting, bank reconciliations. Anybody do any of that when you first started? Yeah. I did all that stuff. So I thought, I can't go to college for years to do this. Doesn't make any sense. So I felt a bit trapped because I had the time. I wasn't in full volume yet, so I had the time to do it, so I just did it. Did this go out again? No? It's back. I'll just use both. All right. So I went to a Walden's bookstore, which doesn't exist any today. And I went through the business section and found a book on time management. And I came to this book called The Time Trap by Alec McKinsey. The Time Trap. Because that's what I felt. I felt a bit trapped doing stuff that I really didn't want to do. Anybody ever felt that way? So I read that book and dog-eared it and marked it and summarized it. And I then applied what I summarized into my practice. And when I first did this, I had one assistant. I was in a 970 square foot little office in a strip center, which is where I was suggested to go. But 18 months later, I had a 5,000 square foot office, 5 doctors, 12 staff member, and was making 10 times the amount of money doing only 3 things. Would the story of that be useful to you? Because it really scaled my business up. So I've shared this information. I just got asked to speak to 58 consultants for a company called CEO Coaching International. Each consultant gets paid $4 million a year, and they're former CEOs of Fortune 100 companies consulting with the current Fortune 100 companies. And this, what I'm about to share with you, is exactly what I'll be sharing with them. Same material. It applies to major corporations. It applies to governments. I've shared it in Tehran and Japan and Africa. It also applies to your practice. So here's the thing. Take a blank piece of paper, a full page, and put 5 equal space lines. So there's 6 equal space columns down vertically. And then 2 inches from the top, draw a horizontal line across all the columns. So 5 lines making 6 equal columns. And then 2 inches from the top, draw a line across so you can give the titles of each of these columns. So I first created this form, which I've been using ever since I was 27. I'll be 69 in a few months, so I've been doing it for 41 years, I guess. So in the far left column up above, just write the word daily actions. Daily actions. So what I decided to do is to write down every single thing that I do in a day from the time I get up to the time I go to bed. Every single thing I do. So I can be honest about what I'm doing with my time. And not just in one day, but each day over a 3-month period, what might you do during any of those days, during those 3 months, put it on that sheet. Now, you won't do that now, but tonight maybe, or tomorrow, or sometime when you're done with the conference. But every action, and don't use broad, vague, general labels like marketing. Get it down to the actual motor action steps you're actually doing. Calling this individual, filling out this paperwork. The actual actions that you're doing, make sure it's broken down. No vague generalities. Don't put marketing or bookkeeping. But every single action. When I did this list, I had multiple pages because I did a lot of stuff. And as I was making this list, I was evaluating me, going, what am I doing this for? And I realized as I was doing this that I could not argue with myself. I was majoring in minor stuff and minoring in major stuff big time. I was doing everything. I was afraid to let go of things, afraid to delegate things. Didn't even really know about delegation yet. But I made this list, and when I got this list, it was multiple pages. There was hundreds of things that I was doing when I got it down to it. And I divided up into personal and professional, what I was doing at home versus at work. Because sometimes I was doing stuff at home that was work, and sometimes I was being distracted at work by stuff at home. But I wrote it all down. After I did this exhaustive list, I couldn't think of anything else to go on that list over a 3-month period, because some things you do every week, sometimes every month. They're just occasional. I listed it all. In the second column, it's productivity per hour. Productivity per hour. How much is it produced per hour? And now you put a dollar value on it. A dollar value on what you're actually getting paid to do that action. Now that was shocking and humiliating in some respects. Because 70% of what I had on that list I wasn't getting paid anything for, but I was certainly doing things. Raise your hand if you have found yourself doing a whole lot of stuff that doesn't give you any income. Now let me reframe what income is. Income means that you're caring enough about a human being to do something that's serviceable to them, that's in sustainable fair exchange that they want to pay you for. And how many would agree when you're doing something that's meaningful to somebody else, that's when you have some of the most fulfillment? So as I was making this list and I was going down this list, a whole bunch of insights came. I realized, first of all, how much I was doing that was devaluing me. And as long as you devalue you, so will the world. So will your patience. Until you value, don't expect the world to. Until you value your time, don't expect the world to. The world on the outside is a reflection of what's going on inside you on the inside. So when I made this list, I found out when I was adjusting, I put about $1,500 an hour. This is in 1982, so that was pretty good back then. But $1,500 an hour, 12 to 15 it ranged. When I was doing exams, this, radiographs, this, whatever I was doing in my clinic, and imagine and extrapolate it per hour. So if I did an exam and it was 10 minutes, I'd multiply whatever I got for that exam times 6, and that would be what I would get per hour. If I did a narrative report or something and it took 2 hours to do it, I'd divide $400 by 2, it's $200 an hour. And I extrapolated and I found out that a lot of stuff was not being charged. A whole lot of stuff, 70%. And I said, why? Why am I not charging for it? And the only answer I could come up with is because that's what everybody else is doing. So why can't I start a new trend? Why can't I get to value what I do? Why can't I get other chiropractors to do the same? Why am I sitting there subordinating to somebody that's not efficient and not valuing themselves, I thought. I also found out that me going and speaking at a breakfast club, I learned certain stories and things to share that generated patients. And I knew for every 60 patients, I could get at least 6 to 8 new patients. For every 60 people in a talk at a little breakfast club, I could get 5 to 8 patients. So about a 10%. I could close 10% just going out and doing talks. My case visit average is around $3,000. So that would mean if I got 6, that'd be $18,000 per an hour to do a talk. And some of them were only 30 minutes, but I would hang out for an hour at a breakfast club. And I thought, that is way, 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 way more efficient per hour than even me doing adjusting, which created a conflict inside me. I've got an internal conflict doing what I love doing, and I spent 10 years of college to go do. That's not the most efficient thing I can be doing. And I thought, wow, I could go over here and I could generate clients. But I also had a dream to teach, and I wanted to be a great teacher, and I wanted to be a great chiropractor, and I wanted to teach chiropractors what I learned and pass the torch. Raise your hand if you'd love to pass the torch. So when I put the dollar values next to it per hour, I realized the most significant thing I could be doing is out sharing the message. A man with a mission, and pardon me, it could be a woman with a mission, a man or woman, a human being with a mission has a message, and they have a vision. If they share their message and share their vision, they flourish. Those are the vision flourish. So I made a commitment that I was going to get out there and do more speaking. Even though I was already doing it, and even though I knew that was growing my practice, and even though I really made a real focus, because I realized that's the most efficient thing I can be doing, is getting out and exposing myself. Because one-on-one in the practice was not as much leverage as I could one-on groups. And so I made a list of all the different possible groups, from little breakfast clubs to conventions to conferences to radio to television. I made a list of every possible way I could share my message with people, and I started doing them all, because I knew I could leverage. And some didn't give returns immediately. Breakfast clubs did. Radio and television didn't get it immediately, but over 6 months they started coming in. It was just repetitive exposure. I realized that the most significant thing I could be doing is out there sharing a message, prioritizing my patients, adjusting the most influential patients, and getting doctors to do some of the clinical work and training them on my skills and passing the torch to them and get them to do it. And I can delegate that because I could extract surplus labor value out of their service by having them do some of the clinical. I could help more people be in practice, learn more efficient systems. So I made a commitment that that's what I was going to do. As I was going through that list, I saw it. Because that way I can be training doctors, I can be teaching them, I can be going out and sharing a message, I can work with the highest priority clients, they can work with the other clients, and I can leverage that, and I can generate more and build a practice more efficiently. So I basically got it down to speaking, teaching doctors, and working with the highest, most influential clients. Those are the 3 things that I was going to do when I looked at that list. And I also saw that if I'm not delegating the lower priority things, I'm devaluing myself. Anytime I'm doing a $20 an hour job instead of a $18,000 an hour job, I'm devaluing myself on the planet. That's a hard one to face at first. Raise your hand if you can understand. That's a hard one to face at first. And you give yourself all kind of bullshit experiences and justifications why you do things, but it's really just a fear of going on and doing what you really would love to do. Today I teach, research, write, and travel. That's it. Everything is delegated. Even my girlfriend, I delegate George Clooney and Brad Pitt and Gerard Butler to make love with my girlfriend, and she loves me even more when I do that. That's a bad joke. If you saw my girlfriend, you know I wouldn't be delegating that. But I realized just as I made that list, it's time for me to be delegating. I was going to hold myself back if I didn't do what was really most important. So that was the second list. And I reprioritized the list when I got through to the very top one that produced the most per hour down to the one that produced the least per hour. And the ones that produced the least, I started to charge for things that I hadn't been charging for.